that's never going to cut it. That's not going to generate the activity, because when I'm talking about calls or dial outs, I like to think of them as unique numbers, unique dial outs. So you're not calling the same person 3 times and claiming that that's 3 dial outs. That's still really technically 1 dial out, right? Because you're not going to generate any more activity from those 3 than you would one. So preparation is one of the reasons that recruiters aren't hitting the call numbers that they want. And when you talk to a recruiter and you ask them if they're prepared for their BD hour or their calling session, or to make 50 to 100 calls in a day, they're like, yeah, I've got my list ready. And when you put up the list, very often, sounds really simple, but they don't have 50 to 100 names on there. And it's something that I fell foul of when I started recruitment. I planned my day, like, cool, these are the calls I'm going to make. I'm going to work this job. I'm going to spec out this candidate, get my shortlist. All right, I've got 20 people on the shortlist. Get my candidate. Brilliant. I can go to 10 companies. Great. 30 people to call. That was it. That was all my calls for the day. So I was never going to hit the call volume I wanted, because even if you call through twice, think, well, there's 60 there. There's not going to be, because let's face it, the data we have quite often isn't right. So you've got 30 people there. Let's say 5 of them, they don't have a phone number, or their phone number's wrong. So now you're on to 25. So you double that, you're down to 50. You're just about scraping it, right? But then you get through to some of them and they're not interested. So that's, say, 10 people off the list. So you've done 25 calls and you've only got 15 left. You're at 40 calls. And that's it for the day. That's never going to cut it. That's not going to generate the activity, because when I'm talking about calls or dial outs, I like to think of them as unique numbers, unique dial outs. So you're not calling the same person 3 times and claiming that that's 3 dial outs. That's still really technically 1 dial out, right? Because you're not going to generate any more activity from those 3 than you would one. So try and have a list of at least the amount of calls you want to make. So if you want to make 50 calls, have a list of at least 50. I always aim for like 100 names on a list, right? Because if you hit 100 in a day, that's incredible. You've smashed it. You've done really well. So you're not very often going to hit that 100. So you're always going to have a few left over for tomorrow. So you've got your contingency list. So this is something that I started working with. So I'd have that main list of, say, 30 people that I'm going to call through the day. Then I'd have my contingency list. So, okay, I'm working a job. That's all the people I need to call from it. What's my second job I'm going to work if I've got time left? Well, there's another list of people I can call. What about a third job? Are there any old jobs that I can call back through the shortlist? So I've got a contingency list. And then when it comes to calling clients, okay, I've got my list of people I'm going to send a CV to. I'm going to call them. How about the follow-ups from the last CV I sent? Or actually, I've got some lapsed clients there. I need to call those. Or I've got some clients that I just need to have a check-in with, or follow up on a placement that I had. So you can have a contingency list there as well. So it's quite easy to get to 100 names if you've been recruiting more than 6 months, right? But that's just the start of it. We're going to do far more than that. We're not just going to have that list, because that's not really preparing yourself. That's preparing yourself to make 100 dials. That's not really preparing yourself to have 100 calls, right? We need to dive in deeper. We need to find out why we're calling them, who we actually want to call from that. 'Cause sometimes it's just a company. So can we dive even deeper? Especially if it's a new BD, we just have a company name. Let's try and find out who the specific person is that we need to call. Can we find their number? So we're not saving that for the day that we're dialing. I'm like, right, okay, I've got to call this company. Who do I call? Where's their number? What am I doing? You've got it ready to go. So 100 names, 100 numbers, with 100 companies next to it. And then from there, we need to have a reason for calling, because we're not just going to call and say, hi, my name's Martin from ABC Recruitment. Just called in to introduce myself and find out a bit more about yourself. Because who's going to take that call? You're going to get nothing from that. The phone's going to get slammed down quicker than anything. So we need to dive in deeper. We need to have an objective for each call. We need to have an opener for each call. And we need to have a list of objectives for each call, right? But not just your main reason for calling, but what do we want to get out of the call, and how are we going to navigate that? So in the next few videos, I'm going to dive into those things. So we're going to have, at the end of these few videos, our list of 100 names and numbers. They have a reason for calling them that they're actually going to want to engage with. We're going to have objectives of what we want to get out of the call. And we're going to have that opener that's going to get them to actually then engage in that objective of the call, right? So stay tuned and we'll start building up the skills and all the knowledge that we need and the methodologies we need to start smashing those call numbers.